Good day, class. I welcome you to another video for this course. This is Module 8 for the course Conflict Resolution, and the topic that we'll be treating in this module is international organizations in conflict resolution. So we can talk about conflict resolution and we'll try to look at the impact or roles of these different or selected various international organizations in achieving conflict resolution at the international level. In our previous one, we've been able to look at international conflict, that is conflicts at the international level, whereby we looked at different conflicts between various selected and countries, between the different countries, what led to it and the impacts of the. So now we're looking at the impacts of these international organizations, as they seem to be the one that is best fit to solve international conflict, their role in conflict resolution. And for the contents of the module, we're looking at the role of OAU in international conflict resolution, then OAU in the Nigerian Cameroon Bakassi Peninsula dispute, and also the role of AAU in the immediate crisis response and the likes. We'll also be looking at mediation and confidence building under OAU. Also, we'll be looking at United Nations in international conflict resolution, the role of the United Nations in Gaza conflicts 2023 to present, and others. We'll also be looking at the European Union in international conflict, the role of the European Union in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Republic of Congo conflicts. Also look at ECOWAS. That one is very close to us here, so we can easily relate. ECOWAS and the role of ECOWAS in international conflict resolution, also the role of ECOWAS in settlement of boundaries of Nigeria and Cameroon, role of ECOWAS in Liberian civil war. So international organizations occupy a central and paradoxical place in the study and practice of international conflicts. Born largely from the ashes of two world wars with the League of Nations 1919, and later the United Nations in 1945 as the most prominent attempt to replace anarchy with collective governance. International organizations were explicitly designed to prevent, manage, contain, and resolve armed conflicts between and within states. Yes, the same anarchic structure of the international system that gives rise to conflicts also severely constrains what international organizations can actually achieve. So now let's look at OAU in international organization. Let's we can't talk about OAU in international organization without giving a background knowledge of what OAU is, how it was founded, and the main role of OAU. So OAU means is an international organization which was established by 32 independent countries by 1963. The major reason why OAU was established was because of the colonization of Africa. So by 1963, when OAU was established, not all African countries had gained independence by then. So the formation of OAU, of this organization, on May 25, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with the signing of its charter by 32 African head of state, was a culmination of efforts by African leaders to promote unity, to promote solidarity and cooperation among African states. So the idea of a Pan-African organization dates back to the early 20th century, with various movements and conferences advocating for African unity, including the Pan-African Congress. So we can easily say that the main and the aim of OAU is to ensure that Africa is united, is to ensure that all African states are economically and politically independent. However, it was not until late 1950s and early 1960s, as many African countries gained independence, that the momentum for a continental organization gained place. So the OAU's founding fathers, which include Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, and Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, envisioned an organization that would promote economic, social, and political cooperation among African states, just like we have stated earlier. So let's look at OAU in the Nigerian Cameroon Bakassi Peninsula dispute. So the Nigerian Cameroon boundary dispute over the oil-rich Bakassi Peninsula and borderland and maritime borders was one of the most serious interstate conflicts in post-independence Africa. After the independence era, so one of the most serious cases that we had that could be called international conflict or international crisis is the Nigerian Cameroon boundary dispute. So a fighting first broke Fighting first broke out in 1993, which and also escalated dramatically in 1996 and again in 2002 2004, and threatened to become a full-scale war between the two of West Africa's strongest military powers. The OAU later transformed into the OAU was later transformed into African Union in 2002, and they played a decisive and ultimately successful mediating role that prevented escalation and produced a peaceful legal resolution during this period between Nigeria and Bakassi. Although the boundary was mainly later given to Cameroon over Nigeria. So let's look at the roles of OAU immediate crisis 1993 to 1996. So after the Nigerian and Cameroonian troops clashed in the Bakassi area in 1993 to 1994, Cameroon took the unprecedented step for Africa at the time of suing Nigeria at the International Court of Justice (ICJ) in March 1994. Nigeria initially rejected the court's jurisdiction, the OAU adhering to its sacred principle of of its precedences and its deep fear of opening a Pandora's box of border reviews to question the colonial era boundaries, but immediately activated diplomatic mediation to stop the fighting. OAU was also scared of, being the fact that most African countries just gained independence, and in order not to escalate in the issue of boundary dispute, they had no choice but to adhere to its sacred principle and its deep fear of opening a Pandora's box of border divisions. They don't want to they don't want to revisit how border is being shared and all. So they tried to avoid that. So at the OAU summit in Cairo 1995, and through its mechanism for conflict prevention, management and resolution, the OAU appointed a high-level mediation team. So that's also that's one of the steps that OAU has taken when it comes to international conflict resolution. So direct OAU mediation and confidence building. That's 1996 to 2002. The OAU Secretary General Ahmed Salim from Tanzania personally chaired multiple rounds of talks. The most important initiatives were when we are talking the most important initiatives during this time were the establishment of Nigeria Cameroon Mixed Commission (NCMC) in November 2002 in Geneva, facilitated and shared the OAU with UN support. Regular summit level meetings between President Olusegun Obasanjo and Paul Biya Cameroon, often hosted or co-chaired by OAU. So, and deployment of OAU military observers along flashpoints to monitor ceasefires. So let's look at Green Tree Agreement 2006, the OAU greatest success. After the ICJ delivered its judgment on October 10, 2002, by awarding Bakassi to Cameroon on the basis of the 1913 Anglo-German Agreement and subsequent colonial treaties, OAU, with strong backing from the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, convened the decisive talks that produced the Green Tree Agreement, signed on June 12, 2006 in Long Island, New York. Nigeria also agreed to withdraw its military and civil administration for Bakassi within 60 days, completed August 2006. So Cameroon guaranteed to protect the rights of Nigerian nationals remaining in Bakassi, many held dual identity till now. So creation of a follow-up committee chaired by AU and to monitor implementation. So now let's look at United Nations in international conflict resolution. So United Nations, as we've addressed, can be said was the successor. United Nations is the successor of the League of Nations, and it was created in 1945 to save succeeding generation from the scourge of war. It is scourge for another war to break out. So, and to save chapter 6 and chapter 7 of the UN Charter give the organization the widest legal toolbox for conflict resolution of any international body in history. Negotiation, inquiry, mediation, reconciliation, arbitration, and the likes, resort to regional agencies, sanctions, and even the use of armed forces. In practice, the UN record ranges from spectacular successes to repeated failures. So let's look at the role of UN in the Gaza conflict. UN has played a multifaceted and increasingly pivotal role in addressing the Gaza conflict since the escalation on October 7, 2023. When Hamas-led attacks killed approximately 1,200 Israelis and took 251 hostages, prompting Israel's military response that has resulted in 46,000 Palestinian deaths. As the primary global forum for peace and security, the UN has invoked its charter provision, particularly chapters 6 and 7, to mediate ceasefires, deliver aid, investigate violations, and advocate for a two-state solution. Despite structural constraints like US vetoes in the Security Council, the organization has mobilized unprecedented humanitarian resources, which it was issued binding legal opinions through the International Court of Justice, ICJ. So now let's look at diplomatic and mediation efforts of UN. The UN Security Council, UNSC, has been the epicenter of diplomatic initiatives by adopting several resolutions amid intense debates and vetoes. Early in the war, US vetoes blocked multiple ceasefire calls, but breakthroughs occurred. Resolution 2735, June 2024, demanded a phased ceasefire, hostage release, and aid surge, and the likes. So by November 2025, Resolution 2803 endorsed the US-backed comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, authorizing a temporary international stabilization force (ISF) under a board of peace to oversee security, demilitarization, and borders, with UN involvement in aid coordination to prevent diversion by armed groups. So let's look at UN humanitarian assistance and protection when we are talking about the Gaza conflict. This humanitarian arm has been indispensable in Gaza, where 90% of the population has been displaced, hospitals are barely functional, and famine risk persists. UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees has delivered critical aid despite Israeli restrictions, reporting in situation reports 188 by September 2020 that only 107 trucks entered daily from October 2023 to January 2025, less than a third of pre-war level, exacerbating shortages of essential like antibiotics and IV solutions. So, and still on the UN humanitarian assistance and protection, now let's move on to legal and accountability mechanisms. The US has leveraged judicial bodies to enforce international law with landmark ICJ involvement in South Africa's request in December 2023. Provisional measures ordered Israel to prevent genocidal acts and ensure aid by May 2024. So the July 2024 ICJ advisory opinion declared Israel's occupation illegal, leading to GA resolution ES 1024 demanding withdrawal by September 2025, a deadline unmet as of December. So the Human Rights Council extended the fact-finding mission on Gaza, originally 2009, but was renewed in 2004 to 2005, and investigating violations including air attacks. Now let's move on to the European Union in international conflict resolution. The European Union was formed through a gradual process of economic and political integration among European countries. Beginning in the aftermath of Second World War, the idea of a united Europe dated back to the 1940s with Winston Churchill's 1946 speech calling for a United States of Europe. In 1951, 6 European countries, which are Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, signed the Treaty of Paris, establishing the European Coal and Steel Community. So this was followed by the 1957 Treaty of Rome, which created the European Economic Community (EEC). So the EU was officially established on November 1st, 1993, with the Maastricht Treaty entering into force, and has since grown to encompass 27 member states with a population of over 447 million people. So now let's look at the role of European Union in the Bosnia-Herzegovina and the DR Congo conflict. The European Union has been cornerstone of a conflict resolution and stabilization in both Bosnia Herzegovina, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, leveraging its common security and defense policy mission. So European Union's role, which can also be referred to as EU, has evolved from post-war reconstruction to fostering EU accession as a stabilizing anchor, with EUFOR deployed since 2004, serving as the primary military deterrent under a UN mandate. Recent EU efforts in BIH, as Herzegovina, focus on accelerating enlargement to counter ethnic fragmentation and Russian influence. However, in March 2024, the European Council opened accession negotiations without preconditions on implementing European Court of Human Rights ruling on discrimination, a bold step in incentive reforms. So let's look at ECOWAS in international conflict resolution. So the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, was formed on May 28, 1975 in Lagos, Nigeria, with the signing of the Treaty of Lagos by 15 West African countries, which include Benin, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo. The idea of regional economic cooperation in West Africa dates back to the 1960s, with various attempts at integration, including the West African Currency Board and the West African Airways Corporation. However, it was not until the early 1970s, with the oil crisis and economic challenges facing the region, that the need for a regional economic community became present. The founding fathers of ECOWAS include Nigeria's General Yakubu Gowon and Togo's Gnassingbé Eyedima, which was envisioned an organization that will promote economic integration, cooperation, and development. So let's look at the role of ECOWAS on the settlement of boundaries of Nigeria and Cameroon. So Nigeria-Cameroon Bakassi Peninsula disputes, where ECOWAS mediation prevented war between two military heavyweights. Clashes erupted in 1993, as we've stated initially, but Nigeria contested jurisdiction. ECOWAS activated its mechanism for conflict prevention through the MSC, appointing special envoys and hosting shuttle diplomacy. After the ICJ ruling 2002, that is when ICJ awarded Bakassi to Cameroon, ECOWAS co-chaired the Nigeria-Cameroon Mixed Commission (NCMC) with the UN facilitating the 2006 Green Tree Agreement, witnessed by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan for phased Nigerian withdrawal and rights protections for locals. So by 2008, full handover occurred peacefully, averting refugee crisis and economic sabotage. This success hailed as ECOWAS' finest hour, reinforced the Multi-Possibilities norm and inspired similar frameworks like joint maritime patrols in the Gulf of Guinea. So now, class, let's look at the role of ECOWAS in Liberian civil war. ECOWAS played the central and most decisive role in managing and eventually resolving the Liberian civil wars from 1989 to 1997 and 1999 to 2003, when Charles Taylor's National Patriotic Front of Liberia (NPFL) invaded the country in December 1989. The conflict rapidly spiraled into one of the most brutal civil wars in African history, marked by the collapse of states, widespread atrocities, and splintering of multiple armed factions. However, in August 1990, ECOWAS created the ECOWAS Ceasefire Monitoring Group, known as ECOMOG, a multinational peacekeeping and later peace enforcement force. It was led overwhelmingly by Nigeria, with significant contributions from Ghana, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Gambia, and later Senegal and Mali. ECOMOG landed in Monrovia on 24 August 1990, in the middle of intense fighting. Despite criticism of Nigerian dominance, allegations of ECOMOG human rights abuses and looting, and accusation of bias against Taylor, ECOWAS intervention remains a landmark in African conflict resolution. So in conclusion, international organizations, despite operating within an anarchic global system that limits their coercive power and often subjects them to great power vetoes and sovereign resistance, it has been able to remain indispensable actors in the prevention and management and resolution of armed conflicts, from the pioneering regional peace enforcement mission of ECOWAS in Liberia, which saves a collapsing state through ECOMOG, and relentless diplomacy to the OAU or African Union's patient mediation that peacefully resolved the dangerous Nigeria-Cameroon-Bakassi dispute, and from the European Union sustained stabilization efforts in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Democratic Republic of Congo through military deterrence, enlargement incentives, and also to the United Nations multifaceted response in Gaza, combining humanitarian lifelines, diplomatic pressure, and judicial accountability mechanisms. Thank you. That will be the end for this module.